Okay, we're going to get started. Let me get a 45-degree angle here. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abraira. I'm on the board of Tewatohnhi'saktha, and I also teach entrepreneurship at John Molson School of Business. And we're moving on to a topic here about new opportunities for Kahnawà businesses. We have two parts. First part's going to be a little bit more funding-oriented. Second part will be a little bit more procurement-oriented. On our panel, we have Myriam, Vallières, the Youth Entrepreneurship Advisor for the First Nations of Quebec Labrador Economic Development Commission. Welcome, Myriam. We also have Pheroz, Associate Vice President, Eastern Canada for TD Indigenous Banking Group, and we have Daryl, Leclaire, Director of Business Services from Tewatohnhi'saktha. So perhaps to get started, we can just ask you to introduce yourself briefly, talk a little bit about your organization, what are its main functions in supporting Indigenous businesses.
Okay, I think most of you know me, Daryl Leclaire, Director of Business Services, Tewatohnhi'saktha. I see many of you who have accessed our programs in the past. We do have, I guess, I'll give you a very brief overview of our programs. We do have, I guess I'll call them our everyday programs, marketing and professional services, which are available to anyone that's in business or about to be in business, allowing you to access marketing or pro services such as an accountant or a website developer. We do have, I'll call them 3 different capital cost programs. The first one, many of you have applied for. The most common one is our Business Assistance Program Fund. The second one is called TBCF, Tewatohnhi'saktha Business Contribution Fund. It's a grant program we run through the NACA services. The final one actually isn't into effect yet. You're actually the first ones hearing about it. Is going to be called the Indigenous Women Entrepreneur Program. It's a micro-lending program, meaning small loans, small grants. It's really just there to help. Its primary goal is to help those startup businesses or the part-time businesses, really just to get greater representation of women in the entrepreneurial community, women being 51% of the population and approximately 33% of the entrepreneurial community, is just to encourage that. So that's the quick version.
I usually say good morning, but it's not morning anymore. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Myriam. Thank you very much for inviting us in the community today. I work for the FNQLEDC, which is the long acronym, but still easier to remember than the full name. Ron, you did it right. So First Nation of Quebec and Labrador Economic Development Commission. Our mission is very wide, so it's to advise, accompany, and support First Nations in achieving their socio-economic objectives. So as you can probably imagine, it's a very large mission because we work with band councils and we also work with entrepreneurs, so community members. So we work on, I want to say, many levels of socio-economic development. Today I'm here to focus on what we offer for entrepreneurs. So we do have different services for youth entrepreneurship, for women in entrepreneurship, as well as for social economy. And I feel like we're going to talk about funding opportunities a little bit deeper, so I'll keep that for later. So that's the very, very short version of what we do. So thank you again.
Thanks, Myriam. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pheroz, Associate Vice President, Eastern Canada for TD Bank's Indigenous Banking Group. I also, if you'll allow me, want to acknowledge and recognize that this afternoon I'm situated on unceded, ancestral, and never surrendered territory of the Kahnawà. As a non-Indigenous person with settler ancestry, I make this acknowledgement also in the context of some of the actions that I have the privilege and pleasure of serving community members in Kahnawà around things like financial literacy and workshops. It's one of the ways in which I think TD Bank delivers all of the bank in community, and most of you will know TD Bank as a full services financial firm. But what you may not know is that we do more than just supply and manage capital. We do financial literacy workshops, we do philanthropy in community, and we are focused around 3 main access points: access to capital, access to employment, and access to housing. And so I think we'll get into it later on today in this discussion, but the success factors that we have are all around the framework that TD uses around the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Report and Commission and the calls to action. But more importantly, and equally important, is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, you might think, for example, that this is a strange document for a bank to adhere to, but it's at the core of our philosophy of what we do at TD Bank and the Indigenous Banking Group about how we bring those access points to capital, housing, and employment. So good to be with you, everyone, and thank you.
I'm sure you can keep it.
Yeah, okay. Next question is for me.
There you go.
All right, thank all of you. And for Myriam and the acronyms, just really appreciated it. Back in an earlier lifetime, I worked for 3 years for the FNHRDCQCD-PNQ, which is now in the second floor at Tewatohnhi'saktha. It used to be city. So, okay, some of you are beginning to touch on it. Maybe we could drill down a little bit and talk a little bit about, with respect to entrepreneurs, what are some of the funding options in terms of grants, contribution, equity investment, and how do they interplay with some of the unique challenges and unique characteristics? How might they be specifically tailored for Indigenous businesses? And if you feel you want to talk about it even from a local perspective, regional, or even national perspective with Indigenous financial institutions, just in a general point, what are some of the more specific characteristics of options for Indigenous entrepreneurs?
Do you want to go first? So maybe I'll start this one off sort of with the following statement. One of the ways that the bank delivers itself in community is through subject matter experts. And I'm joined today by some really remarkable colleagues. You can see them in the back of the room, Sebastien and Ziad, and our branch manager, Shadowgay. This is the way in which these access points actually happen in the most tangible way. And we wouldn't be able to do that without the subject matter expertise that goes into what it means to support Indigenous businesses, organizations, governments, and community members. And so, in one of these access points that we try to deliver and make sure that we're being tangible and meaningful is that capital matters in Indigenous economies and in community. And that capital has to be equitable. And this is the challenge I think that many banks sometimes come up against. They say, well, listen, if the community is, for example, not self-governed and under the, prejudicial Indian Act, that there's a limited amount of supply of capital that can be had. But that's last year's and last decade's way of thinking. Today, banks must be prepared to be equitable and, in the context of these calls to truth, calls to action, be really meaningful in how we deliver. So I'll give you some really tangible examples. While it is true that under the auspices and this prejudicial Indian Act that sometimes taking liens on collateral assets is difficult, this isn't the only way banks can collateralize and or be sure of a repayment stream. Sometimes there are things like council resolutions or comfort letters, but more importantly, what TD really focuses on is the cash flow and the individuals, the community members who are running that business. This is where we have the greatest amounts of success. And the way we measure that success is when those clients of ours in community tell us that we're the bank of choice for Indigenous peoples. So we take this to heart because it means that we're delivering the bank in the most equitable form possible, just as if you were any other business anywhere off of and outside of community. So one of the elements that is so important in this is the agency that community members have. And I want to sort of stress this throughout our conversation today, is that community members must insist on and we must deliver that equitable access to capital. And we have to be creative, but it means that we have to be strong in the subject matter expertise that we're delivering, and we have those people that do that in our practice.
All right, I'll try to be as good as you. I want to say one of the things that we do differently at the FNQ LEDC is we're not a bank and we're not an indigenous financial institution. And now you're going to ask, so why are you there sitting on the funding panel? So our main goal is to help entrepreneurs get funding from other sources of bank financial institutions that can provide, I want to say, better or biggest funding opportunities. Now, because we are in tune with the needs of entrepreneurs that are living, starting, trying to expand and feeling those needs, we developed some few funding opportunities for women right now. So sorry for not women, identifying people here in the room. So we started those small funding opportunities to help fill the gap of bigger institutions. For example, we now have a little funding for website designs and putting yourself out on the online market out there. We also have a small funding for, and by small, I mean $30,000 and lower, but for renovating or creating a space for your business. So those are type of expenses that were hard to fund, to get funding from other institutions. So we're trying to adapt and fill those gaps. So we have another type of funding for buying businesses. So it's a new transfer service that we started. So, and I don't know if any of you here have thought about buying or selling a business? Any of you? Not quite yet. Maybe one day you want to sell your business, who knows? It's a whole process. It's complicated. So we try not only to offer a companionship, but also some funding to get those professionals the fees and pay for all of the market research and all of the paperwork that you got to fill or you got to understand before being ready to sign a contract to either buy or sell a business. So we are, I want to say, a small player, but one of the biggest impact that we have is facilitating the preparation and the work to get access to IFI, to indigenous funding institutions for bigger funding.
Okay, I guess for myself, I'll take a step back, and I think the biggest advantage for Tewatohnhi'saktha, and sometimes we tend to get focused, I guess, on the business development side of Tewatohnhi'saktha, but it's going back to 1999 when Tewatohnhi'saktha was created, was that bringing together the different organizations such as KJEDA, KEDA, and it really sort of, the advantage to this community is all of those opportunities are all under one roof. So for us, it's obviously I concentrate on the business side, but we also need individuals to get trained before they start their businesses. So there's that, I guess, that sort of connection between the various, everyone within Tewatohnhi'saktha, all pulling together in the same direction. In terms of, you asked, do we operate on the regional? Obviously, we operate mostly on the regional level in terms of a lot of our programs are extremely Kahnawà specific, if not exclusive. Some of the programs do, however, have been more, such as the TBCF and the IWE, are more geographical in area. So in that sense, I'm still learning how to deal with external communities because I'm so used to being part of this community. So that's where, these connections come in for me, is learning more about the way other communities do business.
All right, yeah, let's follow up on what Daryl was saying because I'm interested to hear and for people to understand. Like Myriam, do you interface with SOCA and Investment Premier now? So if we think about financing indigenous businesses, Daryl is ending off on saying we all have to work together, and Pheroz is coming from a traditional, conventional Canadian bank, but in the indigenous world, there's a multitude of funding agencies, and Tewatohnhi'saktha is now starting to get a little bit more regional exposure with the funds that are focused on Montreal. But Myriam, perhaps you can touch a little bit on the Quebec, the regional approach in Quebec through things like SOCA and Investment Premier National.
Yes, but I think...
or go ahead, Pheroz, you go.
You wanted to make a comment before we dig down into deeper in the... Go ahead.
Okay, really quickly, because I love the theme of what you guys are both talking about. This collaboration, I think, is a really important part on how capital gets into community and how some of that equity really happens. And so if you're an entrepreneur looking for funding, know as well that one pathway to one bank, for example, or one funder is not the only pathway. In many cases, institutions like ours will look for ways to collaborate. And I often say this, but I think it's quite true in many ways, in the true sort of Indigenous tradition of collaborating and working together and reciprocating. We will do some mini club deals or mini syndicated deals. Sometimes these are deals where we share capital between several banks or several institutions or several organizations. We can search for various levels of funding, not just in terms of organizations, but how a sort of a capital stack will work in terms of where the sources of funding comes from. Those collaborations happen all the time. And Myriam really made a really good point about buying or selling a business. The next biggest opportunities for, I think, community members that I see in our daily practice is purchasing non-Indigenous businesses and bringing employment and prosperity back into community. It stifles and it sort of, stems some of the leakage points from community that, keeps that prosperity in community. And I think it's so important. It's a big thing in terms of what we're seeing in our day-to-day. And a lot of the funding that happens for those acquisitions happens through collaborations like this one with SOCA, with organizations who can, add their part in terms of their expertise, their funding, and of course, their collaboration around how getting a deal done.
Thank you. See, I'm glad you speak ahead of me. I want to say one of the biggest things I've learned, and I've been doing this for about 8 years now with the FNQ LEDC, is when I started, we would have one-way conversations. I would call SOCA. I would have a conversation with them. And then I'll be like, maybe, okay. And then I would call Desjardins, sorry. There's a Desjardins bank in Wendake. So I call Desjardins and then be like, what do you think? And then we'd have a lot of very closed conversation about this project and that project. And now what we've started doing is all right, let's call SOCA, let's call TD, let's call the government of Canada or the government of Quebec. Let's put everybody in the same Teams meeting. Thank you, COVID, but So we put everybody in the same room, virtual or real, and then we talk with the entrepreneur about what's your project, what's your need, and how can we get the best funding structure for them. And I feel like that's the way that we get the most good results, and results not only for the bank, but also for the entrepreneur, well, mostly for the entrepreneur. So we can see at all the offers on the table, what are the grants that you can offer? Because yes, it's not always loans. Sometimes you can have non-refundable money to start your business. So is that accessible for this project? If so, how much? How much does the entrepreneur have to invest to? I mean, if you're expecting not to have to invest anything, I'm sorry, just come back in a few years. You still need to invest some part of your skin in the game, But then bank and grants and other local organizations are there to help and pitch in, to share that risk with you, to trust you, to start your business. And I feel like that's how we have the biggest investment, but also the greatest results that will have an impact on the long term. Because what we've seen in the past is we'll invest in the business, we'll give them 50,000 as non-refundable with 70,000 of loan, and 2 years later they cannot make up the payment, they cannot survive. They had a good investment but not a good strategy. So now working all together, making sure that the plan is viable, the plan can go through that third year phase where it's hard, and then keep growing and building those relationships for later too. That's how I feel like we're doing the things in a different way, but in the most successful way. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear about the views on collaboration. I think a takeaway for potential entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs is don't give up on finding and exploring all of the funding options that are out there, because Pheroz is here representing what I would say is a traditional Canadian bank, and for sure RBC is also involved in Indigenous communities, and for sure we have a Caisse Populaire in our community that supports businesses, and there's these regional bodies which are Indigenous financial institutions and the local institutions as well that support it, and the idea is to try to develop a mix of a package that's best for the Indigenous entrepreneur. It's good to, and it's particularly good to hear that conventional banks are trying to get involved.
Yeah, and this is such a critical point. I don't think we're the only bank, but as I said before, I think that we measure success not just by the volume of dollars that we're putting out into community and that community is using for employment, for prosperity, but there's a way in which the successful banks and organizations do it. And I don't know if you guys agree with me, but in our practice, what I find is we have the best results when these are community-driven solutions. So there's never, and although this is a very esteemed panel, to my colleagues here, there's nothing worse than a banker coming into community and telling community what they need. And that's true for an entrepreneur as well. But when a bank is responsive and starts first by listening and understanding, and then employing the resources and knowledge that it has in favor of that entrepreneur around community-driven solutions, that's, I think, how we get the most success. And so the way that banks are doing it, I think, is definitely changing. We want to definitely see more of it across the industry that I operate in. And yes, it is competitive, but this is a good thing for community members and a great thing for entrepreneurs. As I said at the opening, community members and entrepreneurs in community have agency. Exercise it, demand, insist on it. TD Bank is one of those banks that will be there to listen and understand and put the resources and knowledge that we have at your disposal.
And if I can add to that, what I think is important to understand is that it's forever evolving. I feel like your area of expertise is not the same today as it was 15 years ago when you started into your first TD Bank, right? It's been different since I started with the FNQ LEDC, as our relationship with the institution, financial institution, either traditional or indigenous, and it's forever changing, evolving. So if you ran on a closed door before, I think you have to try it again. And even if it's not the same door, you got to keep trying because things are changing. And right now, the momentum is for women entrepreneurship, is for youth and entrepreneurs. There is a lot of energy, a lot of funding available. So if you hit a closed door 2 years ago, have the courage to try again, maybe to adapt to a new plan, maybe to change a little bit what was your mindset, maybe to put a little bit more work into it. But have the courage to try another door. Things are changing, and I feel like it is a good time for community members to make that world a better place the way they want to do it. And the money is there to help you, really.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with both of you in so many ways, and thank you for a little bit of an infomercial for Tewatohnhi'saktha, because that's what we've always done. It's been part of our community. We know our community. We participate in our community. Our business is advancing benefits us, not as an organization, as individuals, as much as it does an organization. So that's always, I guess, how we've always operated. I'll throw out a plug to the Caisse Populaire as well, because we do have a Caisse Populaire that's also very active in our community. So we've, this has always been important to us, is those establishing those relationships and using them to I guess, move our business community forward.
Maybe I'll just mention before Pheroz mentions, maybe are we leaving out another player in this, Business Development Canada, the BDC? Do you have any interaction with them?
Yeah, BDC recently came out with a new initiative. I don't call it a new fund, but it's a new initiative that essentially makes some capital available with guarantees to lenders like me to help support the acquisition of new businesses. So if you're an entrepreneur who's looking for this type of financing, you can come see a bank like TD Bank. We'll be there to sort of introduce you to partners like that. If some of that incremental risk is harder to essentially underwrite or mitigate. But that being said, I want to highlight, Tammy from Maitri Trust in the room here, because not all of the knowledge and understanding has to come from a panel or participants like us. A lot of it is already in community and has been here all along and knows community. So that kind of insight to me is invaluable. I, as a lender, will always look to find out if community members in entrepreneurship have gone in community first to say, who are the contacts that you've had, and, is this something that's supported in that, discussion around community-driven solutions. I think there's a lot of value already in community, and it doesn't always have to be assumed that it comes from external. I think a lot of that incredible knowledge and experience, resides in community already too.
And maybe this might sound a little bit technical, but maybe you can comment on some of the challenges with respect to unique ownership structure issues facing Indigenous businesses on reserves, things like sole proprietorship versus an incorporated entity. Any thoughts on that?
I have many thoughts on this. I don't know how much time you have. So I alluded to this at the opening. Access to capital. I think you always know if a bank is doing its job in the way it's supposed to, in the way they claim to be living up to the calls to action about making capital more equitable. Anybody who tells you today that sole proprietorships or limited partnerships or general partnerships or industries associated with cannabis are off the table isn't listening to what's happening in community and in Indigenous economies. So I alluded to this because I said that the subject matter experts at TD, for example, know what they're talking about. They know that when a cannabis retailer in community circulates cash from a white label bank machine to the counter to buy, for example, product, for example, and I know it's contentious in Kahnawà right now, but I'm giving you an example of how bankers must be aware and in tune with the economies that are happening in community. And so there are obviously some challenges, but overall, bankers should be there to listen and understand it, and then address and put the structures in place to make it happen. It may not always work exactly that way, but I am convinced, and I know this in our practice, day to day and from the last 12 or 13 years that I've been in community, is that we know that we are working for community this way. We have industries that were typically never looked at by banks, for example, like the hotel or the hospitality industry or the service industry, industries that were typically not well regarded. As I said, that's the 1980s way of looking at it. In 2026, what we're focused on is making sure that some of those share equity financing opportunities for community members to buy businesses, to expand and grow businesses is at the core of what we do. And putting capital behind that is what's critical. There should be no more limitations in the offer that banks have, and with the knowledge and resources that we have, that wouldn't serve community members very well.
It is a hard question. It is a hard challenge, but solutions are out there. And I feel like one door for that is your band council, your local organizations, because they are the ones that are most susceptible to help you out with that. But other kind of solutions out there, I know you can have a loan guarantee from other institutions to help you get access to that capital. So it is a very, I want to say, it's a complex question, and it's hard to just tell you tomorrow how you can access bigger capital on reserve to build a new garage. But it is something that we can sit down and look at what are the potential solutions according to how much money you need also. And are you in tune with your community? Are you in tune with the council, or is that not an option? But there are more than one options, more than one solutions out there. Bank know it's an issue. Indigenous financial institutions, they are more willing to take the risk because they know it's an issue. So there's definitely workarounds that are now in place to help you have access to the capital. But you need to be open as an entrepreneur. You need to be open at what you need and what you can put on the table, and then be open to talk about other people, about your projects. And I feel like that's one of the hardest challenges I face with helping entrepreneurs, is that they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it to their community members. They don't want to talk about it to the band council. They don't want to talk about it to their local organizations because they are scared of so many things. But being forward with your idea and trusting the people you talk to be able to work on the solutions and not just steal your projects, or put to help you out. Trusting the people you talk to and having that open conversation will always be the first and best solution I can recommend, and that's the way we're gonna find out how you can access the capital.
Thanks. Anything, Don? Thank you, Myriam. Anything? Thank you, Myriam. It's true. It is a complex topic. It's been around for years. It links to jurisdiction, and it links to how band councils operate and how the individuals can work together. We're not going to solve it, that's for sure. But Myriam brought us on to our next point here. Maybe you can put on a little bit of your rigorous analysis hats. What are some of the common pitfalls that small businesses and entrepreneurs bring when they arrive to you for funding? What are some of the common pitfalls that they're not really prepared for? And what are some of the ways, in non-financial ways, that you can support them through resources or whatever?
How much time do I have? I think some of the more common, pratfalls I see. I think it's already been alluded to. Number one is financing and being able to access financing, as well as having enough capital of your own to begin the project. I think sometimes non-financial entrepreneurs tend to underestimate the amount of time that they need to invest in their project, invest in their business. I couldn't tell you how many times I've had an entrepreneur come to see me and say they want to see they want to submit a business plan, and I'll see you on Monday. As anyone who's ever written a business plan, you don't start it on Friday and complete it on Monday. So I think, to me, those tend to be the recurring issues. Is number one financing, not necessarily.
Daryl, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? I just want to throw in there that my entrepreneurship students at John Molson School of Business, at the end of the semester, they do start their business plan on Friday and hand it in on Monday.
But they don't sleep in the meantime.
But you're not offering the money at the end. So you're looking at it a little different.
They get a grade.
They might be able to do it by Saturday morning if they use AI.
I want to start before the funding. And one of the reason why entrepreneurs have a hard time getting funding is because they don't understand money. They don't understand the power of money. They don't understand how to use it. And I know there is an initiative, there is more than one initiative about financial literacy. And this is one of the biggest pitfall, is understanding not just the dollar sign at the end of the number, but where it comes from, how it works, and how to properly use it. And I feel like before having people in my office if they could have a real understanding of what is financial literacy and just credit, money, debt, as an individual before trying to think about it for a business, that would go a long way. And I know I deeply support those initiatives about helping people understand financial literacy at any age, anywhere in their life, having debt or not, having good credit or not. I feel like this would provide so many people going down that pit. The second thing, I love the answer about time. Yeah, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And then 3 months later, you get an email, hey, I'm back. I feel like a lot of people that I've worked with have a hard time envisioning themselves in the future. So we talk about a business model. We talk about what you want to do, what you want to offer, which products you want to sell. And then we ask people to do a financial forecast of how much they're going to sell in the next 3 years. And they don't even know where they're going to live in the next 2 years. And a lot of people have never been asked to put themselves in the future. You know, like the typical question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? A lot of people don't answer it. They don't want to answer it, or they just don't know about it. But as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to put yourself in the future, see how you're going to keep growing and survive in the next 2-3 years. And I feel like this is one of the biggest area that it's hard to develop that skill. And it takes a lot of time and conversation with the entrepreneurs to say, yes, but what do you want to achieve with this? I know you want to start selling your business. You want to start selling your t-shirts tomorrow. Great. You want to make money. You want to have a salary and income. You want to be your own boss. You think next year you can maybe hire someone, but what in 2-3 years, 5 years, where are you going to go, what you will need, and being able to do that exercise helps entrepreneurs having successful businesses on the long run. But I feel like it's a really hard step to overcome as young entrepreneurs, but also as women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I would echo both those elements. First, of course, is a plan. And it doesn't have to be an AI-generated business plan, but a plan, right? Projections matter. What the next 12 or 24 months look like, where sales will be generated, at what margins, and at what profit. How much of that profit will be reinvested into the business. And number two, I think that the biggest challenging part that I see as a lender is that opening balance sheet, that day one of your business where you say, okay, well, this is the amount of money I have in and the skin in the game that was referred to. That's important. Sometimes some of the most important startups happen or don't happen based on that initial level of capitalization. So as you plan and as you lay out the groundwork for what the next 12 to 24 months of the business is going to look like, capitalize the business. Now, this is not an easy thing to do. It means putting your own money in. It means getting it from friends and family, for example. I was speaking to, I won't recall her name, Jen Hardy from Cheekbone. Harper, right. We were in Fort William last week, and she said to me that, when she started up her business, she had no idea what skin in the game actually really meant. But it means that, when you put that forward to yourself in terms of what kind of initial amount of money is going to be in your bank account to start absorbing all of your startup costs, and then to generate things like current assets on your balance sheet, like receivables and inventory that people like Ziad and Sebastien are going to be more than happy to finance and give you a return on. It's that initial amount of money that you put down. And it's not lost with me. So it was Jen, I think, who said she thought it was funny when the banker said, well, you need to go to friends and family to put equity into your business. And she said, well, I don't have friends and family who have money to put into my business. So we understand that as well, and this is why partners like these guys really come into play. All of that matters, and all of that is critical in terms of how you plan based on the initial capitalization on the balance sheet. If there are two takeaways from just this panel in terms of the startups in the room, those are two really important points to nail down when you go see your banker to say, hey, yeah, I have put money into this. Now, what are you going to help and do to support me as well?
All right, thank you, guys. It's clear business planning and financial literacy doesn't necessarily have to be super complicated, but covering the fundamentals is very, very important. Understanding cash flow, understanding your balance sheet, it's really critical. And understanding basic financial literacy is good for even people who are not getting into business. All right, let's turn it a little bit more future-looking. What kind of emerging trends, looking ahead, what kind of emerging trends or significant opportunities do you see in the future landscape for Indigenous businesses? And what is one powerful piece of advice or encouragement you would offer to Indigenous entrepreneurs who are thinking about growth?
So we already alluded to one of them. Share equity financing is the big one. This is the one that I think is the next huge wave of opportunity for communities right now. So if you are an entrepreneur who is looking to buy or acquire a business, this is an incredible phenomenon that's happening all across Turtle Island right now, where Indigenous entrepreneurs are buying non-Indigenous companies and acquiring really important assets in the national economy. This is an incredible leverage point. If you see where I'm going with this, is that when Indigenous peoples control more of the assets and the infrastructure in this country, more good things happen for Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. So this is one area where, as a practice, TD Bank is really focused on. I mentioned access to capital, access to employment, and access to housing, but in share equity financing, where you identify a target that you want to buy and say, and go to the bank, well, here's some of my equity down, and here's what I'd like you to do for me to purchase a 51% stake in this non-Indigenous business. Come see us. All kinds of banks in the market right now are actively involved in not just the expertise around valuating that business, but the accreditive, or what they call the earnings that come with that acquisition, to help support the debt that we'll provide to you to buy that business. Why do we do it this way? Well, it's a simple equation. We know that when Indigenous peoples and community members buy businesses, they don't just buy a value of an asset. They're buying employment, that matters. They're buying prosperity that stays in community, that matters. And they buy influence and knowledge, that matters. So when Ziad and Sebastien and I look at a deal and we say, well, listen, why would an Indigenous entrepreneur want to buy this target, this company at a high valuation? We understand why that premium exists, and we understand why we can finance it. The second area is procurement. This is incredible right now. If you're not already participating, find a way. And I think that Millie will have some things to say around this. But banks are looking for ways to encourage entrepreneurs to be able to provide the capital so they can participate in procurement streams that the federal government is putting out there right now. That 5% or 3% or 1%, I forget what it is now, in 5% in defense spending, for now, it's just a myth. We are far from that 5%. But friends, if you are looking to participate in a procurement stream that will support the federal government spending, and you hear about it on the news every single day, go for it. Go see your banker. Say, listen, I've got a great product that does this little piece for this type of defense spending and this type of airplane or tire. I can supply it, and I just need more capital to expand my business. So instead of doing 30 pieces, I can do 30 million pieces of it. Banks will look to that and say, well, listen, you've got a procurement and a purchase order from an institutional supplier in the defense procurement and buying streams. That's something that is bankable and something that we want to support. So those two areas are really important. That's the emerging trend. Look for ways to participate if you can. I think that suppliers like us as lenders will be wide open to opportunities like that to support.
I'm taking notes. we should always do panels together because we have a new business transfer service and a new procurement service. So I feel like you just did a great promotion for those new services that we have in the house. But I agree with everything you said about purchasing existing businesses and procurement. But I'm going to bring you elsewhere, if you allow me. Here in the community, you still have a lot to do and a lot that you want to see and a lot that you wish would be different. And that's your first trend, I feel like, is allowing yourself to put your color and your authenticity into how you want things to be. And that will maybe be less of a big amount of money, but the impact will be social, will be lived every day with you, your family, your friends, and will be for the whole community as well as for yourself. So I feel like local, smaller businesses is also a trend because it allows you to make yourself live and just have that daily experience in the way that you want it to be, in the way that you think will be resembling more you and not just the first person that was here. That makes sense? Local authenticity. I feel like it's one of the biggest trends that you can tap in easily right now. And the other one is, if you have bigger dream, is, you mentioned it earlier again, AI. AI is going to change the world. It is easy to get scared about it. I am. I hate it. I usually don't use it, but I am lucky to have entrepreneurs who want to be the first one to use it in a meaningful way and to change how it's going to have a positive impact on us and not just destroy the planet with the environmental impacts. So AI is a very big trend. It has pros and cons. It's the biggest new thing in the world right now. But you are able and you can tap into it if you are passionate about it and if it's the way that you want to leave a positive impact on the world. And so on that note, my one advice would be speak up. Speak up about your ideas, your project, your vision, and find cheerleaders in your network, in your family, in your friends, anywhere, to help you just do the first step on the path of entrepreneurship. And then in 5 years ago, you're going to be in my place. In 5 years from now, you're going to be at my place.
I'm going to come back to the local level rather than trends. I guess for us, the pathway I see as going, I had to calculate some stats recently, and during Tewatohnhi'saktha's first year, business services had 12 clients. We are not there anymore. I think we use more than 12 businesses today in collaborating for this event. The Kahnawà business community has obviously exploded over the years, and in some, our programs have definitely helped, have definitely been good, have definitely been beneficial. But I wonder, to me, that seems like the next step is sort of reevaluating. We're still dealing with the same dollar figures than we were in 1999, and that's the trend. Is for me, is we're going to have to find a way to make those same dollars work better for our community going forward. So that's where I see us going.
All right, thanks, everyone. So we have a few minutes left. How about any questions from the audience?
I didn't entirely understand what the defense funding was.
Well, there's a procurement stream that's happening right now. So the government of Canada is announcing some huge major projects that are happening in Turtle Island that will last several years, many, many years. And there is an opportunity in some of the legislation in terms of how the departments that buy from suppliers have a minimum threshold of Indigenous-owned and operated businesses to buy from. I think that is, Millie told me, 5%. The federal government won't meet that requirement even close, but it means that there's an opening for 5% of all procurement, I think in defense spending, and Millie will talk about it, all spending to come. So I think that's billions of dollars. So if there's a way for Indigenous entrepreneurs and community members to participate in that, there's an opening, there's a door where there's a preferential view taken for Indigenous-owned and operated suppliers. And there happens to be one that I know of in Kahnawà, actually.
I just want to say stay tuned for the next panel and you'll hear all about it.
Yeah, and that's a good note to end over, and stay tuned for the next panel, but thank all of you. And we talked about AI, and Myriam had just very, very heartfelt comments about businesses being authentic to our community and to our values, and Daryl highlighting the need for more institutional support, because the funding to support the businesses in the community has been pretty much flat for years now. We have so many more businesses that need support, and young entrepreneurs coming up. So any last questions, or we'll call it the session? Anybody? All right, well, I'd like to thank again Pheroz and Myriam and Daryl